Hey guys, Victor here, coming at you with another deck profile, and for today's video we're doing an updated Lightsworn Tearlament list. Now the deck basically the same as always, with just a couple of changes here and there, with the ultimate end goal being to essentially just mill most of the deck, if not all of it, and then at that point we can basically just guarantee that whatever we do end up milling will pretty much be whatever we want, right? And what we typically want is to be having like just the Tearlament portion left in the deck so that we continuously are able to trigger their effects to be able to fusion summon nonstop and just basically have like a never-ending grind game. So with that out of the way, let's jump right into it. As always, we're going to be starting off with the monster lineup first, and the first card we're going to be talking about is Weiss Lightsworn Archfiend, who is pretty much going to be the only Lightsworn monster that we're going to be playing at 3 in this deck. And the reason for that is it's because it's the best one, as it essentially just allows us to bridge into every single engine, right? It's a level 4 Light Fiend tuner monster that has 2 very strong effects. And even without those effects, though, it being like a Light Fiend tuner monster that happens to be level 4, just it helps us provide so much value because it literally just does open up basically every single play from the extra deck possible. But as for its effects, right, you can take any other Lightsworn monster from your hand, put them on top of the deck, special summon this card, and then mill 2 cards, including the card you just stacked. So it's great for helping you fix your hands where you end up drawing Wulf and Felis, which do happen way more often than you may think. And as for like its graveyard effect is when it goes from deck to grave, it's able to reborn any other Lightsworn monster not named Weiss. So yeah, just like the amount of advantage this card generates is literally just unmatched. So yeah, 3 Weiss, gotta play it. Then for the other Lightsworns, we're playing our 2 Lightsworn Dragonling. So Dragonling is also another phenomenal card, but it's nowhere near as impactful as Weiss's, which is why we're only playing it at 2. And if I'm being honest, in a lot of situations, your Dragonling is going to be more of a win more type of card, which, I mean, it's not a bad thing to have, but that means that we don't need to necessarily rely on it to have the game won. Now, where this card truly shines is when you're able to basically bait out all of your opponent's interactions, and you just save this card for last, because when this card hits the field, and if it's able to resolve, it literally just guarantees you full combo, like at minimum, right? As you get to special summon this card, which leads you to the Minerva Synchro, which leads to like a mill 6, kind of. And then from there, the Minerva will give you Visa Samratara, which opens up your entire Tearlament engine. And then you also have like 2 level 8s now for Zombie Vampire, and like things just get way too out of hand if this card is able to resolve. But like I said, you don't necessarily need to rely on it to be able to do all that crazy stuff. But even so, 2 Dragonling, perfectly fine. Then for the other cards, we're playing our 2 Felis Lightsworn Archer and the 1 Wulf Lightsworn Beast. These are the bricks of the deck, and we basically just use them for free bodies, right? Now you may be wondering, why do I play more Felis over more Wolves if Wulf is basically able to be special summoned whenever, compared to Felis, who has to be milled by a monster in order to bring itself back? And the fact of the matter is, Felis is a tuner monster, which is very important to be able to access other cards in our extra deck, and it's pretty pivotal to just like the Minerva combo in general. So that's the main reason why I play Felis over Wulf. And Felis actually has an effect on the field that allows us to clear our opponent's board, which does come up sometimes. So you never know. But yeah, 2 Felis, 1 Wulf. And then for the final card of the Lightsworn engine that we're going to be playing, we're going to be including Punishment Dragon. So this is actually something that I used to play in like the earlier builds of this list, but it has been missing for quite some time. And the main reason why I decided to just include it back is because it's a dark monster that we can search out. And when it comes to like a deck like this, the Tearlament portion of the deck does struggle a little bit to be able to fusion summon. So just having like another dark card that we can actually take advantage of and allow us to more consistently summon with our tier monsters is greatly appreciated. Even though like we don't really care too much about its effect, but it's just a nice option to have. We're basically just using this for fusion fodder, if that makes sense. But that's it for the Lightsworn stuff, and then for the Tearlament portion, we're going to be playing our 3 Tearlaments Kashtira to be able to mill 3 on special summon or normal summon, and then mill 2 more whenever it's sent to the graveyard by card effect. We're going to be playing 2 Tearlaments Reinoheart. As is always the case with this, unlike with a pure Tearlament deck, you don't need to entirely focus on the Reinoheart aspect. So, or you don't need to focus on the Reinoheart entirely to just get your entire engine rolling, right? You're perfectly fine starting with just like your Lightsworn cards and then milling into this card at some point just to be able to start playing with your Tearlament stuff, but you don't need it to get your engine going, so that's why 2 is perfectly fine. And then for the 1-ofs, the 1 of Merrli, the 1 of Havnis, and the 1 of Scheiren, just to round it out, allows all to basically just mill 3 cards at some point, but more importantly, these are the ones that allow us to fusion summon, right? So yeah, that's it for that. That's it for the Tearlament portion. And then just for the other cards that we are going to be playing just to help the deck out a bit, We're going to be playing 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring because every single Mole Charm just completely bodies this deck. So you need something to be able to stop those cards. We're going to be playing 2 Fiendsmith Engravers, and this is going to be it for the Fiendsmith engine, just because, like I said earlier, the Weiss is basically just able to bridge you into this engine as seamlessly as possible. So we don't need to really commit to cards like the Lacrima or the Lurie or anything like that. And plus, by only playing the 2 Fiendsmith Engravers, that means that we have a little bit more flexibility with the extra deck, as we don't need to play cards like Desiree or Sequence or anything like that, which does help quite a bit because the extra deck is incredibly tight for this deck. That's it for the 2 ofs though, and then for the 1 ofs, we have 1 Beastking of the Swamp. So this basically just allows us to go into either the Rukulos or the Grapha, depending on which one you're playing. And I basically just threw this in here so that we could have like another card that's pretty similar to the Punishment Dragon that we can just use to fusion summon into other cards with. But we don't really want to rely too heavily on this card because, and by too heavily, I mean by playing more than one, because it does tend to break quite a bit in a deck that isn't entirely devoted to it. So yeah, 1 Beastking, perfectly fine. We have 1 Mudora the Sword Oracle because you will be milling pretty much every single card. So you pretty much just want this as like insurance to ensure that you don't deck out. But then even if like you're safe from there, right? It just offers you great graveyard control for both you and your opponent's graveyard. So yeah, just a solid card. We are still going to be playing the 1 Performage Trick Clench, like a good generic mill that is able to provide us with a free level 4 body. And then lastly, we have the 1 Glow Bulb. Now, we will not be synchro summoning with this. We're basically just using it as like another free body that allows us to mill a card. And then from there, we can basically go into like a link summon, right? But yeah, it's not as impactful as it would be in like a pure Tearlament deck, but it's still a very good card. So with that, that's the monster lineup, and now we can finally move on to the spell and trap lineup. Now that we're on the spell and trap lineup, we're going to be starting off with our Primeval planet Perlereino, which we are going to be playing at 3 today anyways. But as I made it very clear in the past, this is definitely one of those cards that you can play at 2 and even 1 just because of how easily searchable it is through the use of Visas Amritara. But I wanted to lean a little bit more heavily on the Tearlament aspect for this deck, so that's why I basically went with 3. And all of its effects are obviously really solid, right? You activate it, you get to search your deck for any tier monster. It boosts all your tiers and your fusions by 500 attack. And when a tier monster gets shuffled back into the deck, you get to pop a card for free. What's not to love? Then for the only other 3 of spell that we're going to be playing, it's going to be 3 Tearlaments Scream. Now, traditionally, you've probably seen me play this card at 2, maybe even 1 in most situations. But because I wanted to focus a little bit more on the tier aspect, and we didn't really have to commit too many cards to the Fiendsmith stuff, we're basically just able to play this card at 3. And don't get me wrong, even though we played this card at lower counts, it's still a phenomenal card in its own right? As we're able to mill 3 cards, lower the opponent's monster's attack, and when it's sent to the graveyard, we're able to search our deck for any Tearlament traps. So we get a ton of uses just out of this card alone. And because we're playing at 3, we're going to be able to do that a little bit more often than we normally would. So yeah, 3 Scream, perfectly fine. We don't play any 2 ofs, but for the 1 ofs, we're playing the 1 Triple Tactics Talent to be able to punish our opponent for hand trapping us, or if we happen to go second, potentially break their board more easily. 1 Call by the Grave, which allows us to stop our opponent's hand traps. 1 Fiendsmith Tract, which essentially just acts as the Charge of the Light Brigade, kind of, because we're basically just only going to be using this card to be able to search out our Weiss for the most part. And it's perfectly fine that way, right? We don't need to rely on cards like Lurie or Lacrima to get full value out of this. Just being able to have access to Weiss at pretty much any given moment is enough already. And yeah, you know, perfectly fine like that. Then we're playing the 1 Tearlaments Grief, which allows us to special summon tier monsters from either our graveyard or our deck. And then all we have to do after that is send something with the same type of attribute from our field to the grave. So even if you don't happen to have anything on the field, you can still activate Grief. You just have to send the monster that you summoned. And that's very useful for having like cute plays with like Reinoheart, right? As you'll activate Grief, summon the Reinoheart, send the Reinoheart, then trigger its graveyard effect to come back, which allows you to discard cards you don't really want, and then just continue to combo off. So yeah, 1 Grief, perfectly fine. And then lastly, we're playing the 1 Foolish Burial, which allows us to send any monster of our choosing from deck to grave. Just remember, do not send Felis with this because it will not trigger, but everything else is pretty much fair game. That's it for the spells, and then for the traps, we're playing our 2 Tearlaments Solyak to be able to negate the opponent's monster's effects, as well as when this card happens to go to the graveyard, it's basically just going to allow us to search our deck for any Tearlament monsters. So it's a negate that turns into a consistency piece. And then lastly, we have the 1 Tearlaments Meta Noise, which is a Book of Moon that allows us to also add back tier monsters from our graveyard. So just an overall solid card that allows us to have like the key resources added back in the form that's typically going to be either like Reinoheart or Tear Cash, usually Tear Cash, but yeah, just really solid cards. And with that, that's the spell and trap lineup, and now we can finally move on to the extra deck. Now that we're on the extra deck portion of the video, the first cards we're going to be talking about are the Exceed monsters, and as a result, we're going to be playing one number 62 Joyous the Timeless, which it has two very solid effects and one effect that we don't really ever use, being the boost effect. But as for its other effects, it allows us to draw 2 cards, discard 1, so just great for consistency. Or more importantly than that, its other effect is detaching 2 to reborn a monster from the graveyard. And because we're constantly going to be milling, even if we don't open up cards like Fiendsmith Engraver or more importantly Lightsworn dragonling, we can still make this at some point to bring them back and then go full combo. And that's extremely evident with cards like Lightsworn dragonling, right? Where, like I said earlier, if that card gets summoned and it resolves, the game is basically wrapped up because you're going to be milling at least half your deck minimum. And that card just needs to be special summoned. It doesn't care how, so it will trigger off the Joyous. So yeah, Joyous, a very phenomenal card for this deck. Then for the only other rank 4, we're playing one Evil Swarm Excited Knight just so that we can turn any 2 level 4 monsters into full Fiendsmith combo, which is pretty important, especially if we're not able to open up with Weiss, right? That's it for the rank 4s, and then for the rank 6s, we're playing one Pilgrim Reaper to make both players mill 5, and one DDD Wave High King Caesar to be able to negate special summons. Basically use it on a case-by-case basis, right? If your hand is weak, you go for the Pilgrim Reaper to help you out. If your hand is strong, you go for the High King Caesar just to ensure that if your opponent does have a card like a Nibiru or a Bestial monster, for example, they'll basically have to burn it before this card comes out. And then from there, you basically have full reign to do whatever you want. And if for whatever reason they don't stop you when this card comes out, the game is also basically wrapped up because you have a 2 special summon negate, and then you're going to go full combo anyways. So yeah, this card's kind of ignorant. And then for the final Exceed monster, we're playing the 1 rank 8 Zombie Vampire. As similarly to Pilgrim Reaper, it allows us to mill cards from our deck and the opponent's deck. However, it only mills 4 from each player's deck. But at the, I guess, small cost of 1 card, you're able to special summon a monster from either of those 8 cards that you happen to mill, which can turn into some pretty funny shenanigans, right? Especially if your opponent happens to be playing something like Kashtira Fenrir, as you can bring back the Fenrir, and then you can use the Fenrir's ability to search your deck for Tear Cash and, just do cute things like that. But yeah, Zombie Vampire, great card. That's it for the Exceeds, though. And then for the links, we're playing the 1 Fiendsmith Requiem to be able to just go full Fiendsmith combo, and the 1 SP Little Knight. Now, we're not going to be playing IP Masquerade or anything like that, but we still are basically going to be able to get full value out of SP Little Knight, whether we're going first or second, because we do play cards like Pilgrim Reaper and Zombie Vampire, right? So ideally, you hit something pretty important to their deck, and then after that, you go into the SP Little Knight in order to banish that 1 card, and then from there, hopefully the comeback is a little bit too insurmountable for them. That's it for the links, though. And then for the synchros, we have 1 Minerva the Athenian Lightsworn, which, similarly to Dragonling, the moment this card comes down, if it resolves, the game is basically wrapped up, right? So because you're always going to be using 2 Lightsworn monsters to summon this, that means that you're going to be able to send 2 Lightsworn monsters from your deck to the graveyard with different types. And then from there, those 2 cards will then trigger and essentially just provide you with 2 free bodies, which you can link, Exceed, Synchro, whatever with. And then this card, after you're done with those guys, is going to banish 4 more cards, and things just really do get out of control from there. And then for the only other synchro that we're playing, 1 Visa Samratara, which on Synchro Summon is able to search our deck for any spell or trap that mentions Visa Starfrost, which is every single one of the Tearlaments spells and traps. And that's it for the synchros. And then for the fusions, we're playing the 1 Necroquip Princess to be able to turn cards like Weiss or an Engraver into this and go for another easy rank 6. Mud Dragon of the Swamp, Guru Wings of Resonant Life, and the 1 Predaplant Dracostapelia. Now, normally these are called Super Poly targets, but we're not maining Super Polys, so that essentially means that we're going to have to be making these the hard way. And I say the hard way, but they're still very easy to make, so it's not like we're struggling all that much. And Super Poly has been relegated to the sides, so if you happen to side them in, you already have the targets ready for you. And then lastly, for the last 2 fusions, we're playing the 1 Tearlaments Ruthless to take advantage of the Beastking of the Swamp. But if you want to play Fusion Grapha, that's also perfectly fine as well. And the 1 Tearlaments Heart to be able to just break our opponent's board. And if they happen to get rid of it by card effect, or if we send it by card effect, it also becomes a Foolish Barrier that comes back. So yeah, this card, pretty cool. And with that, that's the Lightsworn Tearlament deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya!